Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in again. This is the lesson presentation for part 3 of Unit 2, Lesson 3. And in this particular part of the lesson, we're going to be analyzing Hammurabi's code. As you recall from the notes, Hammurabi was the king of Babylon in Mesopotamia, who implemented a harsh system of justice. However, this system of justice is really the start of justice around the world with our courts and laws that are written later on. Understanding this is key to understanding the system of justice around the world for later on too. Let's go ahead and look at the lesson right now. While you're listening to the presentation, please be advised that the first thing you're to do is to read through all the cases on the left-hand part of the chart and then type your predictions in the middle of what you think the verdict or the outcome would be according to Hammurabi's code. And then, of course, now here comes the answers to each of the cases. We're going to explain from the text of the way that they spoke into plain English of what the outcome really was. So please listen carefully for the answers for the far right part of your chart. Remember to copy-paste the correct answer to the correct case and verdict. Case 1, Code 229. What shall be done to the carpenter who builds a house that falls and kills its owner? Any guesses? Hammurabi says, if a builder builds a house for a man and does not make its construction sound, and the house which he has built collapses and causes the death of the owner of the house, the builder shall be put to death. Now, although this might sound extreme by today's standards, back then, of course, you can imagine the importance of finding safety and comfort in the home that you're in. And obviously, there would be a problem if that house were to collapse on you and your family. So obviously, strict consequences would ensue. Next, Case 2, Code 117. What happens if a man is unable to pay his debts? Hammurabi says, if a man be in debt and is unable to pay his creditors, he shall sell his wife, son, or daughter, or bind them over to service. For 3 years they shall work in the houses of their purchaser or master, and in the 4th year they shall be given their freedom. So basically, if you cannot pay your debts or taxes, you have to sell one of your family members or loved ones over to servitude, but later on they can buy their freedom. Now, obviously, this would be nothing that would fly today, but this shows you the strict interpretation of debts and taxes in the ancient world. What should be done if a son is adopted and then the birth parents want him back? So here's the answer. Hammurabi says, if a man takes his own home, a young boy as a son, and rears him, one may not bring claim for that adopted son. So basically what they're saying is that if you want to take your son back, you cannot. So I think that's really interesting when you think about the way that transactions might have worked for goods and products, and of course even family members too. And as an adopted person myself, that's obviously really interesting to think about here too. What should be done when a sister of God or nun enters a wine shop to drink? Hammurabi says, if a sister of God or nun who is not living in a convent opens a wine shop or enters a wine shop for a drink, they shall burn that woman. Now, this obviously sounds very extreme considering today's times. However, keep in mind that the people of Mesopotamia might have been very, very religious, insofar as much to say that a strict breach of breaking gender roles in that said religion could result in this type of consequence. What happens to a wine seller who fails to arrest bad characters gathered at her shop? Hammurabi says, if bad characters gather in the house of a wine seller and she does not arrest those characters and bring them to the palace, that wine seller shall be put to death. I think, as much as this might sound extreme, what they were trying to do by this intention of the law was to try to keep the streets clean, try to keep those vice areas as clean as possible. And so this might be one of the ways to really prove that point and to carry that forward. What should be done about a wife who ignores her duties and belittles her husband? So here again we have an analysis of family structure and gender roles in the ancient world. Hammurabi says, if the woman has not been careful but has gadded about, neglecting her house and belittling her husband, they shall throw that woman into the water. Now, keep in mind here that this obviously might have been made into somewhat of a public spectacle in the ancient world. Respect for the man of the house, of course, is something that was embellished inside of Mesopotamian civilization and society, and of course, to ignore that or to break that would be done at your own peril. Next, what should happen to a boy who slaps his father? So you can probably imagine this one here. Hammurabi says, that son's hand shall be cut off. I think that if you look at Discipline 101 and the way that people, of course, demand respect today, obviously we've come a long way um, in terms of how respect is given. But obviously, respect towards the elders is something that many people would say should be universal across all civilizations and cultures. And many people would say that this might seem a little extreme. However, I think that respect for the elder was really embellished and pushed in this type of civilization. How is the truth determined when one man brings an accusation against another? Hammurabi says, if anyone bring an accusation against a man, and the accused go to the river and leap into the river, if he sink into the river, his accuser shall take possession of his house. But if the river prove that the accused is not guilty, and he escape unhurt, then he who had brought the accusation shall be put to death, while he who leaped into the river shall take the possession of the house that had belonged to the accuser. So what does this mean? If you're a little confused, don't worry, I know that was a lot. What they're trying to say here is that if you are accusing somebody of a wrongdoing, and if that person did not commit any wrongdoing, it is you who are going to be punished, but also vice versa if there was a wrongdoing. So this once again shows you the essence of how Mesopotamians tried to come to the truth in this way. Although this might sound harsh and severe, of course, they're trying to prove a point. What happens to a patrician who punches and knocks out the tooth of a man that is his equal? So in case you're wondering what that means, is that what happens to a person in higher class who punches out another tooth of another person who's also in that same said class? If a patrician has knocked out the tooth of a man that is his equal, his tooth shall be knocked out too. So this kind of relies on the eye for an eye concept, as we talked about before in our unit notes. And when you think about it, it sort of makes sense. However, when you look at this next case, what should happen to a patrician who has knocked out the tooth of a plebeian, who is somebody of a different class? Hammurabi says, if a patrician has knocked out the tooth of a plebeian, he shall pay 1/3 of mina of silver. Now, obviously, there's a class differentiation here, right, from a patrician to a plebeian. So instead of having his tooth knocked out, instead he just only has to pay a little bit of a pound of silver, I believe. So obviously, that shows you a differentiation in class and treatment by the justice system. In conclusion here, based on the rules and punishments we have reviewed, how would you describe Hammurabi's brand of justice? Is it fair, and what does it tell you about Babylonian society? Well, I guess you could be able to say that although this was a harsh system of give and take, and of course, if you were to take or to commit any wrongdoing, this would obviously have some serious ramifications and consequences for you. Although this might seem really severe, I'm sure this was one of the ways to prove a point and to keep civilization from running amok, for lack of a better word. But I do believe that the Mesopotamians, especially in Babylon, valued their roles in society and valued order and valued structure. And a justice system is a way to not only implement that by design, but also to execute that too. Thank you very much for tuning in. And once again, if you need to replay any part of this presentation, please let me know. But at this point in time, you should be able to complete the rest of your lesson accordingly. Thank you.